Hello and welcome to Dice Tabletop. My name is Chris, and in this episode we are slaying the Grey on the Warlord Titan, and we are getting these armor panels painted up. So without further ado, let's get started, and as always we need a base coat. Now there's 38 pieces that need to be primed in total, so I've got to do a little bit of a batch operation here. Starting off with our Vallejo Surface Primer, we're just loading this into the cup. I'm not really caring too much about primer to thinner ratios. We're going to be putting a good few coats of this down to get a really nice even coverage all over these armor panels. Armor panels all primed, and I couldn't help but put them together just to get a little glimpse of what this is going to start to look like, and it is now so impressive just to get the grey off and finally starting to see some colour. And speaking of colour, we're starting off here with Mephiston Red. Now I'm going to be using a guide by Dark Future Games that I found online. I had an idea of how I wanted this Nurgle flesh to look, but I just couldn't really replicate it, and then I found this guide and it is exactly what I want. So we start off with Mephiston Red, a good base coat of that, and then we're going to dry brush over Emperor's Children. This is a nice bright pink. We are going to want to put an excessive dry brush of this on. When you think that you've done enough, you haven't. Do it again, do it again. You can see here I've built up about 2 to 3 layers in total, and it's really starting to come together, but we want to really hit that pink, get rid of as much of the red as we can, leave that really in the recesses. Once that's done, we're now going to be coming over the top then with Talon Sand. This is going to really help blend out with that pink and create a really angry looking flesh tone. We want to be careful to avoid going in too much of all the recesses, where we want the muscle and the gore still to be exposed, but we will be coming back over the top of them just to add more detail later on. So that's the base coat of our flesh done. The next thing we want to do is come in with some yellow glaze by 2 thin coats. This is going to add a really just disgusting, almost jaundice looking effect. We also want to pop it anywhere where there's going to be spots, warts, boily looking things that may have popped or ruptured, and the festering fluid that's inside has seeped out and stained the flesh. Once that's dried, we're now coming in with Druchii Violet. We're going to be using this to add some more depth to the flesh, really create that sort of veiny look, also sort of like a cyanosed flesh as well, like all the oxygen is struggling to get to it. So we want to be liberal with this. This is quite an overpowering shade paint, one that I've definitely started to thin down the later on that I've used it. Next up, we need to start to bring all of these colours together and also add a highlight to it. So we're coming in with Bone White. We're just applying a dry brush, mainly focusing to all of the exposed areas around all of the wounds, the teeth there as well, around the gums, anywhere that light is going to naturally catch on all of these edges. Time now to add some more depth to all of this gore, and we're going to be using Flesh Tearers Red here. I've slightly thinned this down. Now as we're applying this, we're making sure that we go really up close to all of those cracks into the exposed skin there. We want the full range and depth showing of all of this nastiness. Next up now, we need to bring a highlight into these muscles, so we're going to be using the Emperor's Pink. Thin this down ever so slightly, and it was a matter of just coming in with a small brush, catching all of those raised areas, just to put that definition back in. And there we have it. As a test piece, this is going okay so far, but we're not done yet, so let's carry on and get these maggots painted. And to do this, I'm going to be using Tania Yellow by Scale 75. This is a really nice sort of yellowy white colour, perfect for maggots. So I come in here, thin this down ever so slightly, get 2 coats over all of them. Once this has now dried, next we're going to be coming in and using Reikland Flesh Shade. This is just going to add some depth, some brownness, and a little bit of ick to all of these maggots. Once the Reikland Flesh Shade had dried, I then came back over with the Tania Yellow, just add a highlight back over the top of all of those maggots. Now it's time to turn our attention to the teeth. I'm going to be starting off with a base coat of Talon Sand, making sure to get a really nice good coverage over all of these. This is going to be our base coat that we're going to start to build up from. Over the top of this, we're going to be dry brushing Barbarian Flesh. This is a nice in-between tone of the Talon Sand and the Bone White that we're going to be building up to. So using a dry brush, I'm just going in both directions, as well as trying to catch all the edges of those teeth just to get a nice little highlight. Next up, we're returning to the Reikland Flesh Shade to get a really nice deep dark look into all of those crevices. Once that's dried, we're going to be applying our final highlight now with Bone White, coming in and doing it the same way that we did with the Talon Sand, going from both directions, as well as making sure to catch the edges of those teeth, just to really make those pop and stand out. And there we have it, 10,000 years of cigarettes and coffee. Now, I wasn't quite happy with the depth of the gore. Once I added the pink, it sort of flushed out that redness a little bit. So I've come back in now with the gore red, just going in between all of those muscle fibers, just to add a little bit more depth again to what we created earlier. And this, I think, has really added to the difference. And as far as a test piece goes, I'm quite happy with it. I think we've now got a good idea of the direction of how we're going to paint all of these armor panels. So let's just get started. Let's do it. First up then, we are batch coating our Mephiston red. It was a really good job that I did do a test piece beforehand. I need to get a really good, thick, rich base coat of this down. I did a couple more layers than what I did on the test piece on all of these, and I think it's really shone through in the end result. And base coat. Here we have it. We've got everything base coated now in Mephiston red, and I can really start to get an idea of how this is all going to come together. When it was grey, when it was black, it was great. We could see the detail, but now there is actual substance to it, an actual driving direction that we can go in. So now that we've got all of this painted red, the next step is to do our large dry brush of Emperor's Children. Now each of these pieces would probably get about 3 to 4 coats of this in total, so it was a matter of just sitting back, putting some videos on, and working my way through the batch process. And then once I had everything pink, I couldn't resist. I had to put it together. This is a pink Warlord Titan, and I got to admit, I think it goes really hard. There was a very small part of me that kind of wanted to keep it that way, but no, we got to move on, we got to get the flesh done. And now that everything does have a dry brush on it, we can really start to highlight the insane amount of detail that there is to actually paint in this. This is going to be a part 1 of 2 videos. I want to do this justice. I'm not going to rush this. There is so much work that needs to go into this. So by the end of this video, we are going to be in the perfect position to come in and get all of those little pustules, barnacles, rips, tears, staples, veins, flesh, teeth, all fully decked out, and bringing all this together after what has been many, many months. Next up, we're going to be going back to the Talon Sand, making sure now as we go over these armor panels, we want to really be avoiding anywhere where there's lots of ripped, fleshy gore exposed. We want to be keeping that pink and that red recessed within there. I'm also not too concerned if I get any of the Talon Sand over any horns or teeth. I'm going to be coming back in and either base coating them with the Talon Sand anyway, or going to be changing them to like a black to grey tone. And here is the result after about 3 layers of dry brushing. As you can see, all of that lovely flesh, teared muscle is still nice and deep within the recesses. It's now giving me a good idea of the next direction that we need to go in, but I've also got to come and figure out, like I've got a nice muscle section there. I need to learn how to paint muscle a hell of a lot more, as well as on the top of these shoulder panels, there are some interesting like creatures, teeth, some feathers, some gnarls in there. So I've got a lot to figure out with what I'm going to do with those. But the next step now is to move on to the yellow glaze. I'm thinning this down over the test piece. I found that it went on a little bit too strong on the test piece, so what I want to do is thin it down and build it up in layers so I can control the luminosity as opposed to have it just go on straight really bright first as last. Keeping our focus then the same as last time. We're going to be keeping an eye out for any warts, pustules, crusties, anything that looks like it's going to have been weeping pus and staining the skin around it. I changed my brush up though this time. I wanted to use something that I could almost stipple on, something that would really spread out and get a real nice thin coverage that would blend into the skin, opposed to the splotches that were on the test piece. This really did turn into a little bit of a trust the process. When I put it on first in the thin layer, it really didn't look right, but then as we started building up those layers and building up the luminosity, there was a lot more vibrancy, and I was really happy with how this sort of infected flesh ended up turning out. After that was completed, we came back in then with the Druchii Violet, and we're going to go back in and add all of those veiny and cyanose skin tones. I'm thinning this down a hell of a lot more compared to what I did on the test piece. It was really overpowering on the test piece and ended up detracting too much from the overall skin tone that I wanted to create. So I thinned it down a lot here, and I was only focusing really on anywhere that I'd expect to see this type of colour, around anything that might look like gums, veins. We're going around the edges of some of these sores as well, just to create a little bit of depth in that colour there and too, and a little bit of a contrast to against the yellow. Now that it's dried, we can see the effect and really adding just an extra variance into this overall flesh tone. Next up then, we need to start bringing these skin tones together. What I'm going to be using here is skeletal bone. On the test piece I went straight and I put a bone white over the top of it. That was too bright, it didn't have enough of a tonal variance within it, and it went really quite flat afterwards. Using this skeletal bone as an intermediate colour between the Talon sand and the bone white is going to create a much nicer tonal range and really help sort of blend these colours in together now that we've just been putting on as well. Here we can start to get an understanding of how this is going to look overall on a larger piece. It's really working well now, blending in and bringing down some of those yellows, making it more coherent with the rest of the flesh. So again, it was a matter of just putting a video on and getting cracking. And now that we've got all of these pieces complete, I think it's time we got to look at what it finally looks like. So here we have it. This is the first stages now all complete of this armor panel paintwork. This is sort of as far as I can go without having now to go and do more detail. The amount of time that it's taken me just to get to this stage, I thought I'd split this up into 2 videos as opposed to try and cram it all into one. You guys will be waiting like another month or 2 by the time that all that's done until I put the next video out. So what's going to happen now in the next time is I'm going to come around. We need to put a lot more definition now into all of these gory bits, bring those back down to a darker red, dry brush them back up to a more subtle pink. We also need to get all of the teeth, the flesh, the pus, the horns, the eyes, all of that painted up as well. I'm also undecided on how I'm going to do the trim on this armour. I want it to be dark, so I'm going to repaint it black and go from there, whether or not we go black and sort of weather that into heavy browns, or we try and bring it up to a more of a chipped, dry brushed silver, and again put some nice rust tones over the top of it. All that's left for me to say then is thank you ever so much for watching this video. If you liked it, please drop a like down below, and if you're not already subscribed to the channel, it really helps me out. So until next time guys, I'll leave you taking a look at the Titan. Thank you very much, and I'll see you soon.